heading into town now to meet up with a couple of guys to discuss opportunities around Suffolk and east of England. These guys got a really interesting niche within property development, which I'm looking forward to sharing with you, and I've managed to convince them to share a few tips for people who are approaching this type of niche, this strategy for the first time. So, we've had our chat over lunch. It's been really good to catch up. I'll introduce Ian and James. Ian and James specialise in listed buildings, and basically it's a building type that I've always shied away from. We've always shied away from. It's something that just generally not touched with a barge pole, so we just don't understand it so much. To start off with, can you just go a bit into your background? It's got quite a fascinating sort of career as going forward.
Sure. Well, I've been in property for 40 years. I started when I was 16, originally started as an interior designer actually, went to college, learned how to do that, then got into project management and then got into commercial developments, and I've always loved buildings. Even from being a tiny kid, I used to go around castles and stately homes and I love them to bits. So I've ended up, that's really what I enjoy doing. And actually my portfolio are virtually, if you see my portfolio, they're all beautiful buildings. And I do like keeping hold of them. So I've developed a system for developing them and holding them either as single lets or serviced accommodation. And that's really where James comes in, because he is an expert on managing serviced accommodation.
Fantastic. And James, what about your background as such?
So, always loved character properties, always lived in character properties. Did up my first Victorian terrace while I was still at university. And then after finishing university, moved into property management and estate agency, and then have done up other properties since, including my own home. And then we've done some, Ian and I have worked together, and we've done Georgian mansions and turned them into apartments and coach houses. And
we've done all types of buildings over the years, like converted schools into apartments. I've converted things like garages into bars and restaurants. Hotels into nightclubs, even a barge off the river in Leeds I converted into a pub and built a pier next to it, which became a student venue. So all sorts of really wacky things. Always been interested in new concepts. So our latest, what we're doing together, is something called the Property Collection. And that's specifically taking heritage buildings, not necessarily grade 2 listed, or they don't have to be listed, just buildings that are worth keeping for future generations is what heritage means. And we're taking them and we're introducing contemporary interiors that fit within those buildings and managing them as serviced accommodation.
Fantastic. And I mean, going on the theme of myself and my business partners approaching listed and heritage buildings, what would be your sort of initial thoughts on somebody approaching heritage listed buildings? What would be the experience that they would need to get started? Where would be the best place to start with that type of development, that type of building, would you say?
Yeah, well, it's obviously a specialist area, so you've got to be careful. It's the hardest type of planning to get as well. So there are stages of planning, there are different levels of planning. It's the hardest part to do. The planning process is quite difficult. It's very specific to the listed building officer and the conservation officer, so you have to involve them really early in, as soon as you can on the project, because you'll get a feeling for what they want as well.
Okay, so it's very much around the planning element.
Yes.
I suppose to summarise as well, how would you put into sort of five points, 5 tips that you would say for somebody approaching listed buildings and heritage buildings?
Every building is different, but the basic things that you've got to do is, generally speaking, it's usually the external appearance of the building that is the most important part of a listed building, and usually you cannot alter much of that unless somebody's extended it badly, like in the 1960s, or they built a flat roof extension, which you can usually get rid of. But generally speaking, you want to keep the integrity of the original building externally, and so if you need to look at repairs, which is the big thing, because you can spend a lot of money on that.
So I suppose tip 1 would be understanding the external listing of the building.
Yes, you've got to keep the integrity of the building, basically. You can't start changing a lot of that. So it's worth looking for. If you can find a listed building that's been well maintained, externally, like it's got a good roof and it doesn't need a load of repair works and the windows are good, actually you've found a fantastic building to convert.
So I suppose then going on to our second tip would be very much understanding the extent of the repairs,
Yeah.
and if possible finding something that's been well maintained from the
Yeah.
outside.
Perfect,
Right,
yeah.
okay. So,
Because that's where the big money is. Once you get inside, if you're lucky, there's lots of features in that listed building which you just have to keep and maintain.
I mean, you can be very sympathetic when you are trying to devise the development itself. So you're looking at the floor plan, you're figuring out what you can put in there and how it will work. And the more sympathetic you are when you're devising that floor plan, so that you're not knocking down walls and you are working with what's already there, you're more likely to get the consent of the listed building officer, which will help you move forward with the plan.
okay.
You've got to work with the fundamental. A lot of buildings, traditional buildings, have got rooms, and you have to work within the confines of those.
So I suppose straight into tip 3 really is trying not to alter the building too much, working within the skin of the building without altering those listed elements.
You will get certain allowances as well, so there'll
Yeah.
be minimum square footages that normally apply when you're creating studios or 1 beds or even 2 beds.
Yeah.
And you can get certain allowances, so you're missing a couple of square metres on a 1 bedroom apartment, but you've worked within the structure that's already there, then you're likely to be able to get that through planning with the help of the living building.
They are more flexible, and another big point to mention as well is building control, because on listed buildings, basically building control and the conservation officer are more powerful generally, really. So they have to bend often. So you don't have to, like, as an example, double glazed windows, which you might have to put in, or wall insulation. Often, if it's going to affect the look or destroy some features within the listed building, you can avoid doing those things. The building control officer will say, fair enough, it's a listed building, we don't have to do that.
So I suppose in a fourth tip, that would be working closely with the heritage building officer.
That's the key to the whole thing.
Absolutely, and understanding that the other parties around that will bend around that to ensure preserving the building's heritage.
Everybody's working towards the same end, that we all want to retain all the great features that we've got, but incorporate them in something that will now work for today.
Fantastic. And then I suppose as a final tip, what would you add as a final point for somebody who's, say, found their first listed building, they've viewed it, they're ready to purchase, and they've maybe, I don't know, found a hiccup, an issue, say, damp or something like that? Where would they begin to unfurl that problem?
The absolute and utter key to the whole thing is to get a really good planning consultant and a local conservation architect that really understands that type of building. Get that as part of your initial team at the start of this, because again, they are key to success, and your relationship with the local authority is the most important relationship. Don't think that you can sneak around and do things, because that will come back and bite you back at the end. Involve people.
What I would say about all of this, so you're working with a listed building officer and you're trying to create something that's as sympathetic as possible, do not lose sight of all of that, of who your final consumer is.
Yeah.
You need...
Brilliant. You should have 6 points.
Let's make it 6. Let's make it 6 points.
There's no point in bending everything to the will of the conservation officer if you end up with a product at the end which doesn't serve a purpose.
No.
You need to know what your purpose is, and you need to have that in mind when you're discussing it with your conservation officer, and make sure you do end up with something that ticks the boxes that they're looking for.
Absolutely right.
You're ultimately the person who's going to be left with this building at the end, and you need to be able to do something with it.
Yeah,
fantastic. So understand your end market, as with any.
It's the
any
same with
deal,
everything, but this one even more so.
Because you can go off down a track and find you've done everything that they wanted,
but
and you've
it's not commercial. It's not commercial.
It's got to be commercially viable.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, guys. Thank you for sharing.
Brilliant.
Where can we find you?
Yeah, we can contact me, Ian Morton, at ian@theideas.co.uk.
You can find our website, which is www.heritage.apartments.
Fantastic. I will try put those in the notes.
Okay.
And thank you very much, guys.
No, brilliant.
Thank you.
Cheers. Thanks
Brilliant.
very much.
Thank you.
Okay.
Oh, it got cold and dark. Oh, what an epic afternoon. Thank you so much to James and Ian for coming down. It's been a fantastic afternoon. A lot of opportunities. Watch this space. I suppose I wanted to add a final tip to the 5-6 tips that Ian and James gave you. both Ian and James have got years of experience between them in doing what they're doing. And my final add-on to what they said was, if you are new to property or business in general, get educated. Get a mentor, get educated. Believe me, ignorance is very, very expensive.